Okay, so Preston, you and I have both seen Watchmen, and just like with Westworld, this is going to be the first episode of our Preston and Carmine's Watchmen podcast, I guess. And off the bat, I just got to say, I've seen the movie, but back when I was in high school, almost 10 years ago when I was in high school. I'm 27 now. At the time of this recording, I'm 27. In 8 days, I'll be 28. But this is almost 10 years ago when I saw the movie. The movie was fairly long, not bad. I kind of enjoyed it. I enjoy alternate reality in regards to the U.S., like Man in the High Castle, Amazon series, also pretty cool. I recommend it to you. But Watchmen, I was surprised when HBO announced they were doing Watchmen because what could you really do with it? And I saw the first episode of this, and there's a lot they're doing with it. But the one thing they're really doing...
There's a lot, yeah.
There's a lot. And the one thing they're really doing is definitely baiting. I feel like I was kind of baited, especially with how political the times we're living in are now. There's a lot of bait in here. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of bait. I want to say that, well, first off, I love the creator Damon Lindelof. He did Lost and he did The Leftovers, and I think everything of The Leftovers. I love it.
Oh, we know.
And there's a lot of and Lost is a little. The Leftovers is kind of like, imagine if you had the Lost, but things actually came together in the end with a satisfying conclusion. While like Lost, he kind of lost track of the story. But nonetheless, there's a lot of those elements of like mystery and magical realism and things like big mysteries, which is not really that much about the original Watchmen series. Yes, the original Watchmen is a mystery in the sense that it's a whodunit.
Right.
But it's not to the same degree where we have things going on where we're like that are clearly supernatural or seem to be supernatural, and we're just like, what? How is that possible? You know. So there's a lot of very mysterious things, Lost-esque, Leftovers season 2-esque weirdness to it. And yeah, you know, I was pleasantly surprised. I'm gonna say right off the bat, I really liked the first episode.
On a scale from 1 to 10.
The first episode?
Yes.
I would give it like an 8 or 9.
8 or 9. Fantastic. Wow. Yeah, better than Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah, much better than Game of Thrones so far. I mean, we'll see what happens, but I mean, much better than much better than the later seasons of Game of Thrones. I'm not gonna say much better than like season 1 or something.
Oh yeah, no, of course. Well, I would give it a 7 out of 10. It was above average because if a 6 is an average, 5 below, 7 above average. I was thoroughly enjoyed, but there was a lot of questions with a world like this, because Watchmen's already established. So this takes place many years after the original Watchmen movie and comic. And I just wish there was kind of a fish out of water type character that could explain certain things like red furations and squids raining down. And
so a few of those things like you have to get on the second watch. And I watched the episode twice, and so there's a few things I kind of figured out. So in the series, there's a random point in the middle of the story that has nothing to do with the rest of the story where it starts raining squid. And that the reason that seems so weird is because a lot of people are going off of the Watchmen movie, and the Watchmen movie is a very faithful adaptation of the Watchmen comic, probably the most faithful adaptation of source material you'll probably ever see on screen. I don't know if I've ever seen anything as faithful as the Watchmen movie. I'm not saying it's perfect, but hardly anything adapted is very close to what it's adapting. But Watchmen movie really, really tried to be faithful. But the one big major change they made is the ending. And so the ending of the original Watchmen comic is Ozymandias teleports a large giant squid into the middle of New York Times Square to make it seem like there's an alien invasion. And that fear of an alien invasion is what binds the world together at the end.
That's in the comic.
Which is the comic, which is Ozymandias' plan.
Right.
Now, in the movie, they change this, and they make it that Ozymandias has framed Dr. Manhattan, and the entire world is going to unite behind the Dr. Manhattan threat. So it doesn't, a lot of people are like, well, that doesn't really make sense because Dr. Manhattan is American. Like, why would the whole world, and like a puppet of, like, used by the American government,
Right.
why would the entire world unite behind an American threat? But nonetheless, that's the big difference. And so the raining squid is some sort of reference to the ending of the original Watchmen comic with the giant squid.
Oh.
We don't know why it's raining squid still 30 years later, or whatever, because I think Watchmen takes place in 1985 or something around there, and so we're not sure why or what's going on, but something related to the squid. I mean, maybe the government's been doing it because they still need the squid threat to, like, keep the world together. We
Right.
still need to think that aliens are coming.
There's a moment where they're
whatever.
interviewing or interrogating the guy, the white supremacist suspect in the pod,
yeah.
and one of the interrogators asks him, "Do you believe that certain the U.S. government is carrying out interdimensional attacks?" And I'm like, "Interdimensional
Right.
attacks? What?" So that's probably the squid thing. Okay, I thought
Yes, and
the
that-
show followed the
right.
movie. I didn't think it followed the comic. That's where I was a little confused.
No, it's a follow-up of the comic, and from what I can tell, it has elements of even the sequel comic, but not all of the elements
There's
of
a
the
sequel comic. I did not even know that.
So, in the DC universe, the DC universe decided to pull Watchmen into their regular Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern universe.
Oh.
Right. You could roll your eyes at it. Some people say, like, it's a really stupid idea. I haven't read Doomsday Clock, which is the sequel series. Some people say that, like, it's actually really good. It's I've heard really good reviews of Doomsday Clock, though it seems such like a stupid concept to pull the Watchmen into the Superman universe. But nonetheless, from Doomsday Clock, some of the elements are there, like, for instance, Robert Redford becoming president is from Doomsday Clock. And additionally, I think so the original Watchmen comic ends on a bit of a cliffhanger in that Rorschach's journal, which reveals everything, is in an inbox at a journalist's, like, inbox. And that's kind of the end. And you're not sure if Rorschach's message is going to get out and spoil Ozymandias' plan for world peace. And I think in Doomsday Clock it does get out. And so here, if I'm going to guess what's going on, is that Rorschach's journal did get out, but it's been treated like a conspiracy theory. Which is funny because, I mean, it's playing the world on its head. Like, today, it's this world of, like, stupid conspiracies like QAnon and stuff.
Right.
Pizzagate. And Benghazi. Yeah, Pizzagate and Benghazi, all this fake stuff that like people just make up. And so this is funny, and UFOs even, and this is funny in that the conspiracy theory out there is actually true, which is turning the whole thing on its head. Which gets into the politics, and we're going to definitely talk about the politics, but
Oh, yeah.
There's been some reactions to it.
Well, first off, the show opens up with the Tulsa, Oklahoma riots, and this is something I remember reading about in high school. Now, I'm a history buff. I like history. I know about the Tulsa, Oklahoma riots, and when I saw in the scene, the white people in airplanes shooting black people from, like, airplanes, I kind of rolled my eyes. Like, come on, like, they're totally, like, ramping this up for effect. And I Wikipedia'd it, and they fucking used airplanes to kill these people in real life. This really happened? Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous.
A bit of history, the Oklahoma, the Tulsa riots, that was the biggest race riots in U.S. history.
My
Hundreds
God.
hundreds of people died. Yeah.
But from airplanes, like, are you out of your mind?
That's what's so brilliant about the beginning, is they show that riot, which is kind of forgotten in U.S. history. I'm surprised you learned about it in class. I never learned about it in class. And so yeah, they showed the race riots, and then the juxtaposition is with Oklahoma, the musical, which is hilarious because Oklahoma the musical, which is a pretty tone-deaf musical, the Oklahoma City musical takes place only like less than 10 years before the Oklahoma City riots. And there's not a single black person in Oklahoma. And there's no references to black people in Oklahoma. There's a small reference to them being in the Indian territories and how it's dangerous to be in the Indian territories. But Oklahoma is a really tone deaf, beautiful, like wonderful music, great music, probably musically one of the best musicals of all time. Plot-wise, just idiotic. That it takes place just a few years before those riots. It takes place in Indian territory where white people are moving in, taking land from American Indians. It takes place about cowboys where something like 25% of cowboys were black, not a single black character. And so it's brilliant that they did that. And you immediately go to Black Oklahoma where all the characters are black, as this statement it's a lot of emotional stuff that you're pulling out all at once. And I was pretty blown away. I was like, whoa, they're going there right off the bat. Which Watchmen went there right off the bat. Watchmen, the comic, is political. So when people are like, oh, it's so political. Have you read Watchmen? Watchmen's fucking political. This is a political comic, a political subject, and they're going straight in. Yeah.
So that's the one. That was my one thing that I noticed. I can definitely see a lot of people bitching that HBO is trying to bait, but you're right. The original Watchmen comic was very political, and even in the movie, it's still there as well. But
yeah.
It's just I don't remember Rorschach being a white supremacist.
Rorschach, he is written in the original comic as a far right extremist who believes in moral absolutes. He's supposed to be in the same vein as he's supposed to be an Ayn Rand lover, believing in individualism to an extreme and stuff like that. Alan Moore, of course, the creator of Watchmen, is very left wing, and his Rorschach is based on is an amalgamation of various comic book characters that he thinks is ridiculous. Because obviously Watchmen is about comic book. If superheroes were real, it would be horrible, and they'd be abused by and used by the state and fascist powers and right wing powers, and it would be a mess. Alan Moore is very left wing, and he has heavy criticism of fascism and Ayn Rand thinking in Watchmen. And so I'm actually surprised that the HBO series goes a different route. There is certainly criticism of right-wing thinking, but there's also definitely some criticism of left-wing thinking.
Really, because I didn't get the criticism of the left-wing thing. All I really got was, this definitely seems like almost like liberal propaganda in a sense. That's what I've been hearing people say.
See, I've seen a lot of people talking about this, and it's like I think it's people are being selective. If you remember at the beginning of the series, a cop is shot because he doesn't have permission to use his firearm. Now, control and accountability for police officers tends to be, a left-wing kind of issue, while right-wingers tend to be we need to let police be police, and, these criminals need to be, beaten into place, if you're going to super extreme thinking.
Right. And that's the one thing I noticed, too, because the police are normally accused of being white supremacists, but here it's they're at each other's throats.
Right. That's the thing, is they've turned the table on that. But that idea that police have to go through these official bureaucratic circles. Remember, he walks up to the guy and he has to ask permission to turn on his camera to record the whole thing. And then he goes back and he has to ask permission to get his gun out, and it's delayed. And because it's delayed, he's unable to get into position and defend himself, and is shot. Now, that's a severe criticism of this sort of I don't know, accountability of police going too far.
Right.
You know, like, would we really want a police officer to be you know, hindered by such bureaucratic hurdles that he can't defend himself? And I mean, right there, that's criticism of left-wing thinking, right off the bat. So I don't get, like, and I you know, I have a long list of things in this that, like, for instance, the reparations.
The Redfarations.
Yeah, but it's just Redford. It's reparations done under Redford, Robert Redford. I mean, there's heavy criticism of reparations in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was implemented so poorly. Or the fact that, like, in the comic book, Richard Nixon has been president for, like, he's on his 5th term. He's still president in 1985. And it's a criticism of right-wing fascists. But the fact that in this, Robert Redford has been president for 20 years and he's a Democrat, you know, shows that, like, you know, left-wingers would do the same thing. They would stay in power just as long. So,
yeah.
you know, like, you know, all of a sudden you're doing the reverse, you know, or they would implement some sort of, like, well-meaning social program without thinking it through, like reparations,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So
they're hitting the right-wing stuff, but they're also getting their licks in with the left-wing stuff too.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And the fact that it's like, oh, isn't it anti-right wing? It's like the enemies are, like, white supremacists. Like, really? Like, you're angry at a show for, like, painting white supremacists as the enemy? Like, Jesus Christ, next thing you're gonna, like, Indiana Jones is fucking liberal propaganda, you know, because he's killing Nazis.
Right.
Like, come on. Come fucking on.
Like I said, I would have to give it a 7 out of 10. The closing of the episode, which we'll get to in a minute, it didn't close like the first episode of Game of Thrones did, where I had to watch the next episode immediately. It was, okay, I'm willing to go into episode 2. This so far is okay. Not bad, not bad. I'm intrigued now. I want to see how the rest plays out. It's good, but it's not like, whoa, I need to just watch it now good, which is something normally HBO does very well, actually. They did it with Westworld, they did it with Thrones, but I'm not really getting that feeling here. Once again, not bad, but yeah, I'll have to see what happens. But all the characters so far are actually pretty awesome and pretty funny in their own right. I mean, they have the woman who Regina King. She,
Right.
if you're a fan of
Oscar winner, yeah.
yeah, if you're a fan of the Boondocks, she does the voice of Huey and Riley. She's
also in The Leftovers. She was in Leftovers season 2. She was a cast member in Leftovers season 2. Yes. She was also from. If you're really old, you know her from 227. But
I have no idea what that is, but I liked her as Sister Knight. She was fantastic. Don Johnson as Crawford, the chief. I liked him. I thought he was great. It's a shame what happens to him at the very end, but I really liked him.
Spoiler. I mean, I think that's supposed to parallel the comedian dying. You know, because, well, it's definitely paralleling the comedian dying, but, like, the comedian dies at the beginning of Watchmen to spark the whole thing into motion, but, like, and then his blood drips on his smiley face badge that he wears, and that's kind of the symbol of Watchmen in the beginning.
Right.
And here at the end, the blood drops on his police badge. So, I mean, yes, he's supposed to parallel, like, the death of Don Johnson is supposed to parallel the death of the comedian.
And how the whole thing starts down. The whole story.
Exactly.
And the one surprise that was Jeremy Irons as Ozymandias, which is weird because we see the older black man, who
Of course, they never say he's Ozymandias, you know.
They don't, but yeah. And they say Ozymandias' real name is Adrian Veidt?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. And the older black man, who I'm assuming is the black kid from, like, the very beginning of the show, he's reading newspaper that says Veidt, whatever his name is, declared dead, confirmed dead. So, but then you see him this. So Ozymandias is like this really smart guy, right? He's the genius, if I remember correctly.
Right.
So I'm assuming he made his own, like, supercomputer and he uploaded his brain in there, because that's the only explanation for it, unless he's, like, secluded. But the two servants he has kind of almost make it like
they
their
seem
AI.
off, right?
Yeah, they're like their AI.
Yeah, or robots or something.
Something like that.
There's something severely off about them.
Right. So, yeah, no, the show itself, I need to see more of it to really get truly invested, but my interest is piqued. The whole scene with them on the farm, I felt bad for the cows, of course. I hate seeing animals get like killed, even if it's CGI.
I totally forgot about that scene.
Yeah,
That's crazy scene.
but the fact that they have like a machine gun there, the whole war with the cops have to wear like the face. Like, here's the thing.
But I wonder why. That's another question. Why the cops have an owl helicopter?
Right, the fucking owl thing. I remember that from the movie. Like, that was so cool. And I gotta say, like, I'm Brazilian. I was born in Brazil, and you can look up right now, if you go on certain websites that are not kosher. You can see a lot of really gruesome stuff, and a lot of times it's from Brazil. Usually an off-duty cop, if you know what I'm talking about. And in Brazil, if you've ever seen Spinal Tap, Brazil is a lot like the United States, but turned up to an 11. Like, every problem the U.S. has is amplified in Brazil, and I feel like this is something that could possibly happen in Brazil with the cops, and actually kind of does happen, where the cops kind of have a war, not against white supremacists, but against giant ghettos called favelas, and it really is kind of like this, like the scene with the cattle ranch, where they're like using machine guns, like heavy duty military grade weapons against police. That actually does happen in Brazil. Obviously, we all think that couldn't happen in the United States, maybe, but I remember a few years back where, all this, like, Mike Brown, the whole Mike Brown riots and stuff. A couple weeks later, a couple of police officers were shot execution style in New York City, almost like in retaliation or something. Like, stuff like this could happen in the U.S. as well. It really could.
Yeah, and of course, the big question is, like, what the hell happened? Like, how? Like, there's so many mysteries. Like, we know that Ozymandias has a plan.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't know what it is, and like how it relates to any of this. Why is a 105-year-old man or whatever, based on the previews, is 105? Like, how is he still alive? How did he hang Don Johnson? No idea. What are the Rorschach gang up to? Yeah.
Right, the 7th Cavalry. So is it confirmed that the black guy the old black man really did hang?
No, but that's what they're at least the first, what you're first supposed to think, but how does an old man in a wheelchair do something like that?
Right.
I have no idea.
I thought that the 7th Cavalry might have done it and he just got there, but when Crawford, the chief, when he's leaving his house and he's putting on his outfit, it kind of pans in on a picture of him and another man. Like, what was, and ominous music is in the background. What was that about?
Yeah, I had no idea. Additionally, when he decided to put on the outfit, that made me think of A Few Good Men, where, I don't know if you remember A Few Good Men, but there's a scene in which Tom Cruise wants a guy to testify. And the guy says, yeah, sure, I'll testify. And then he goes home, decks himself out in his finest uniform with all of his medals on, and then commits suicide.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so, like, when Don Johnson was like putting on his outfit and to look really nice, I was like, does he know he's off to his death? Like, but that just crossed my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would he need to put on his best outfit, to go to the hospital to check on the other cop? I don't know, but it was odd.
I'm assuming the whole thing here, because you're right, it does parallel the comedian dying. That's how it starts the whole series. I think this is, that's where Sister Knight, Regina King's character, she's going to go down the rabbit hole with Crawford's murder. I'm assuming it's going to reveal that Crawford really is a part of the 7th Cavalry, and he's trying to, like, escalate things. That's what I'm assuming. That's my theory of the whole thing, at least. But, no, I really like that character. I was just confused with that one part. Like, he's kissing his wife goodbye. Then it pans in on that picture of him and another man. I guess maybe his son or maybe his dad or something. I have no idea, but I assume the 7th Cavalry was the one that came in and killed him as retaliation.
I mean, do you think that... Yeah, you think Don Johnson is secretly bad?
I think Don Johnson could be a part of the 7th Cavalry, or maybe I don't know how you would explain that. Maybe he's just really good at being undercover. When he was in the owl ship and he blew up those white supremacists. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, it was better than. I mean, the big thing is that. I mean, the 7th Cavalry is willing to kill themselves and kill their own in order to keep their secrets.
Right.
So the fact that he like went in there and like messed up with her flying in order to destroy the guys and kill them. Mm-hmm. I mean, it would make sense. It would make sense to me if Don Johnson actually like was bad and was part of the 7th Cavalry and it staged his own death. Like they rolled out the old black guy in order to like make it look like it was that he was the one doing it to spark tensions. That would make sense. He was just also like too good of a character, wasn't he?
I think so.
Just a little too good.
I like the character. The character was fairly awesome. But no, it's just like I said, I can't really give the show more than a 7 because as much as I like the whole political aspect of it, I just need to see more because we could have another Westworld season 2 on our hands where it just goes in a very pretentious route. Westworld season 2, looking back on it, I didn't like it as much as season 1. And forgive me for being vulgar. It's almost like they put their own heads up their own asses and just smelling their own farts. Like it just feels very pretentious. Westworld season 2 and wasn't David? Is it David or Damon Lindelof?
Damon.
Wasn't he a part of the writing team for Westworld season 2?
I'll have to look that up.
Because when it comes to when a lot of these guys, they usually do the same thing from series to series. That's my one problem. I don't want it to be Westworld season 2 because so far it's good.
No, I don't see this. I just see him Leftovers. Then he did something called Phineas and Ferb, and now he's the creator and showrunner of Watchmen.
Okay, good. Because that's what I'm afraid of. I don't want it to get too pretentious. I don't want it to get like too up on itself, And but no, so far so good. Hopefully we can keep on this. And from the trailer that we got a month or two ago, they're gonna touch on some of the stuff that happened with other characters, like Mr. or Dr. Manhattan?
Dr. Manhattan.
Dr. Manhattan. They're gonna touch on stuff with that. I hope we get a more of an update on other characters beyond Ozymandias. The Rorschach thing really took me for a surprise because I don't remember him being a white supremacist. But what you say about him being like on the far right and all that?
He's super right wing.
Right.
Like he's he's supposed to be an extremist, like a right-wing extremist. Like in the original Watchmen, he talks about like the horrible liberals and and all of this. Like which is really weird considering he's the protagonist and narrator of the Watchmen comic book. Or the closest there is to a protagonist, and he's just such a fucking horrible piece of shit. But like at the same time, like you somehow find yourself, because he's the protagonist, like a bit rooting for him, which is kind of twisted, But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's kind of weird how his gang or the 7th Cavalry wears his mask, and these QAnon kind of weirdos like are in a delusional territory. But if they actually believe that that Ozymandias faked everything with the events of Watchmen, and that there's a big conspiracy, well, they're correct. There is a big conspiracy, but but we'll see if that pulls in. People discovering that.
The one thing I'm actually super surprised at is that they chose Tulsa, Oklahoma as the central setting for this series. Because normally it would be like a place like Chicago or Miami or New York City or Los Angeles. But Tulsa, Oklahoma, that's a very interesting place to really start Watchmen. Because that's not really what I think of.
I mean, I loved it. I mean, I said the same thing. I was like, how are they going to have this in Tulsa and why? And then when they showed the riots and the play, and I was like, and the musical, I was like, oh, I get it. Like it is a big statement because it doesn't even have to be Oklahoma. We could be talking about all of America. And like, I think so. The Watchmen series takes place in 1985, and the reason it takes place in 1985 is that it's making a statement about the big problem in 1985, which was the Cold War and nuclear war, and this idea that nuclear war could happen between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, and that's the big issue. Like, how do you bring peace? And Ozymandias wanted to bring peace. Now, he does it in a really fucked up roundabout way, but that's what it was all about, and it was a pretty fucked up world. And then, so you have to say, like, well, today, 2019, like, what's the big, issue? What's the big thing that's 2019? And, I would say that, like, racism and these white supremacist groups and, like, the rise of
nationalism,
white supremacists, the rise of white nationalists and everything is 2019. Like, that's the issue today. And so if you're making the new Watchmen series in 2019, and we're talking about the big issues that are tearing the country apart, like,
See, this is where I break off with you, and I got to disagree. I think yeah, it is an issue. It is a big issue. But our biggest issue? No. I think the inequality is a huge issue. I mean, it's only recently that everybody forgot about the Panama Papers and how all these fucking companies and bigwigs are screwing people over, and that's really the big thing there. For me, the biggest issue right now in the U.S. is the whole inequality thing, and
I mean, I agree with you, but the problem is that it manifests in the other because of scapegoating. I mean, it's sort of like even if we go to World War II, like, okay, was the problem really racism in Germany? Well, it became a problem because the Jews were scapegoated. Like, things were tough. Times were tough for certain Germans, and certain Germans needed a scapegoat, and so they chose the scapegoat as the Jews. And so in America, certain people, have been left behind, and they scapegoat immigrants and they scapegoat black people, and that's the real issue. So, I mean, I agree with you that the issue is inequality, but it manifests, in a different way because of what people blame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And maybe they're going to get into that. I hope they do, because I was looking at, like, so if you go back and watch again and you figure out, like, what's going on with Robert Redford's reparations, the Redford Asians. I don't know how they said it in the.
I think Redforations.
Redforations. So there's a scene in the when he's doing the interview, the interrogation, where he asks, should all Americans pay taxes? And I think what happened is Robert Redford said that descendants of slaves don't have to pay taxes. And that's the reparation mechanism. If he did do that, it's really stupid, because the people that are most in need of help from reparations are the really poor. And the really poor aren't going to be paying taxes in the first place. Mm-hmm. So the people that are going to make off on that would be, like, wealthier black people would get money if it were black, descendants of slaves don't have to pay taxes, while, like, poorer people wouldn't get really much at all. And so it's a really kind of stupid, that's why I saw some criticism in there. I was like, that's a really stupid way to implement reparations. I understand why it would be done, because you wouldn't need any money up front. You just say, okay, descendants of slaves don't have to pay taxes, and that's the reparations. But like I say, if you're super poor, you don't pay taxes in the first place. Mm-hmm. So you're not giving them any help at all. And so that does get into, like, inequality and poverty and those issues. But I don't. Who knows if they'll touch on.
And on the topic of reparations, like, I like that the show snuck in little things like that, like when she's in the classroom and she's talking about her time in, I believe it was Vietnam, and the teacher says, "Oh, how long were you there? Were you there before it was a state?" Oh, what? Vietnam's a state? Whoa, yeah. That's a little crazy. Yeah. And apparently after Nixon, we did get President Ford, I believe, and then right. It was Redford.
Then Robert
yeah.
Redford.
So I like cool little stuff like that. Watching on the TV, we see,
because it sounds like that Nixon probably dies of old age at some point, and then I'm trying to think when. Let me look up real quick.
When Nixon goes down.
when Nixon dies of natural causes. Oh yeah, no, it actually said that Redford's been president for 20 years, so that makes sense. That Nixon dies of natural causes in 1994, so Ford is his vice president, so he's going to take over, and then Ford is going to lose eventually to Robert Redford in an election.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So no, but I like the little stuff like that. On TV, we see Dr. Manhattan. He's still on Mars building sandcastles.
Yeah, or something.
Yeah.
We only saw that for a second, and then they saw the sandcastle, and then we saw it like explode or something. So.
The squid thing. Thank you for clearing that up. I was like, well, the squid thing. Like, is that gonna get explained? Because I'm not familiar with the comics. I'm familiar with the movie. I think most people are as well. So the squid thing was a little off to me. But no, so far I have high hopes for the show. Is this gonna be HBO's new Game of Thrones? Fuck no. But it has the potential to be something pretty nice and stand out. This is something.
Yeah.
I was expecting them to remake Watchmen, but they're doing a sequel to it, which, okay, I'm willing to give it a shot. So far, it's good. Hopefully, it can keep surprising me because, I don't know, we only got a few characters. We didn't get too many characters. And I gotta say, they keep putting stuff on their heads. I would love it if, by the end of the show, we were rooting for the 7th Cavalry because they're the ones in the right. Despite it being white supremacists and having this fucked up view of the world, they're the ones who are in the right somehow. Like, I would love it if they just did that, switched it on his head like you keep saying.
Right. I mean, I imagine that if it's Ozymandias, that he's the one pulling the strings, and that something's gonna, I mean, if Ozymandias needs to bring world peace again, how is he gonna bring world peace again? I don't know what he's gonna, because apparently the world peace didn't hold. I mean, the world's still tearing itself apart.
It kind of did. I mean, the Soviet Union, we don't really know the status of the United States versus the Soviet Union, like if they're allies now or what it is.
Right. Did they fall apart, in 89, and we don't know. But,
right.
Did the Berlin Wall fall in 89? Did the Soviet Union fall apart in 90? It's hard to say on this alternate history.
Right, and this is why I love these alternate reality like U.S. stuff. Like this is Man in the High Castle. I really enjoy. I really like Man in the High Castle, like the alternate world where Japan and Germany won against the Allies, and they split the entire globe in half between territories amongst themselves. And I just love learning about like what happened to these territories, what's going on in Canada and Australia, and And here, I'm really curious to know what's going on with the Soviet Union. Is it still the Soviet Union? Is it Russia now? Did we finally make Canada a couple of states like we should? Totally should. Did we finally buy Finland or Greenland? No, I would love to know stuff like that, and I hope they go crazy with it because before we end this, I also wanted to ask you one thing. So, do you think this was originally the plan for the Watchmen sequel series on HBO to be so heavily influenced by today's race baiting politics? Because it is a little race baiting, let's be honest.
Well, it has to be. Like I say,
Well, here's the thing. Why does it have to be? Does it have to be because Confederate is no longer happening? Because remember, that was originally a thing with Dave and Dan.
It has to be because it has to be heavily political.
No, I know that, but with race involved as much as it is, my thinking here is that HBO originally wanted something thought-provoking in regards to race, and Confederate was going to be that thing, but I guess HBO broke off with Dave and Dan after they got an enormous deal from Netflix and Disney. I think it was Netflix or iTunes or Amazon. I forgot which one. I think it was Amazon. But originally we were supposed to get Confederate. And obviously we're not getting that anymore because that was going to be HBO's race-baiting show. So do you think that this whole race thing with Watchmen was always a part of the original concept for the sequel series? Or is it something...
Well, like I say, you needed something political, and you needed something as big and hard-hitting as nuclear war. And, that's the thing. It has to be an issue that large. And you're right, maybe it could have been classism, But anything else just wouldn't have felt as big.
Personal?
Yeah, and emotional, and with the high stakes.
Right.
You needed high stakes, Like I heard they redid Red Dawn, and I think in this new Red Dawn, like North Korea tries to invade America or something instead of the Soviet Union, and you're like, you can't go that way because the Soviet Union was this huge power. North Korea invading, that's stupid. They're this tiny little country.
I think it was China, maybe.
Let me look at it real quick. But Red Dawn 2012. Even if it was China, it's still not big enough. Like it's still not as threatening. No, it's North Korea.
Oh, is it really North Korea?
Yeah.
How?
North
How would that ever
Korea.
even happen? Okay.
Yeah, right. You know, so it's even right. So you need something as big and something as emotional and scary as nuclear war. And so yeah, you could perhaps do classism, but you know, I think that there's something big and emotional about and provocative about, you know, race. And so, yeah, you know, people get, oh, you know, is race baiting. I mean, if you're going to do a show with the Watchmen, it's got to be political,
right?
And it's got to be hard hitting, and it's, you know, it's got to make big criticism. In fact, I think, like I say, I think they've gone the other way and are taking shots at the left at the same time, which Watchmen comic did not do. The Watchmen comic just straight up made Republicans fascists,
right,
and Nixon the worst human being that has ever existed. And like anyone that follows Ayn Rand's kind of thinking, a monster. You know, so yeah, that's I don't know. I just think it's funny that people are like, oh man, HBO, their agenda. Their anti-white nationalist agenda. Like,
well, you're always gonna have those YouTubers who, you know, they need debate, and you know, I know a couple of those YouTubers who have railed against Captain Marvel and, you know, Rey in the Last Jedi and stuff like that, and most of them don't even believe it. They just make those videos ripping apart those characters for the clicks and for the money, because the money is there. The money is like truly there. And I know a couple of those YouTubers, and that's essentially what I've been told. But no, would you recommend Watchmen? I would recommend it. It's not for everyone,
absolutely,
though. It's like, this is not for everyone. This is not one of those shows where I could easily recommend to everyone. If you like the movie, you'll like the show.
Yeah. Now that gets into some really weird shit, by the way, because so it's a good thing that the movie was done so faithfully, and that there wasn't done with much influence from Zack Snyder, because Zack Snyder is a right-wing Ayn Rand lover.
He is,
and yeah, and that's what's so amazing is that Watchmen, this incredibly left-wing comic book, is adapted by this right-wing guy. And if you need to, like, you know, what he did do is he put all of his political beliefs into fucking Man of Steel, which is why, like, Man of Steel is so weird, where you have, like, Superman's dad telling him, like, you don't owe the world anything. It's like, what? Like, how is that a Superman belief? Like, Superman believes in, like, that he has to protect the world and that he owes the world everything, and you know, they raised him and it was wonderful and he has to protect them, and you know, his parents being like, whatever, you're on your own. You don't owe the world anything. And you're like, what? You know, like, so it was really, really weird that you had this guy that didn't understand or agree with Alan Moore's vision adapting his movie. And luckily he adapts it really faithfully and as well as he could possibly do. If he put any more of himself in it, it would have spoiled it. Yeah. It's really weird. It's really weird because, like, the fact that Rorschach is specifically based on someone that follows Ayn Rand, and the fact that Zack Snyder is a fan of her work. It's really weird that, like, him of all people was chosen. But
the ending result, though, was, you know, not bad. I remember,
no,
it wasn't my favorite movie, but it was one of those movies where I'd probably watch it one more time in my life, and if I never did again, I wouldn't complain. Like it was not, it wasn't like Goodfellas, level of replayability, Like it was good, but it wasn't like, oh my god, I need to watch this again. It's not like Lord of the Rings extended edition good where I watch that every year.
Yeah, I mean that's another thing is that like when you adapt something, like a movie has a certain flow and pace that you need to have to fit what you want into 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
While if you have, a 12-issue comic book series, that's different. You're going to have 12 different ups and downs before you get to your climax. You're not going to have first act, second act, third act like a movie does. So by definition, none of these adaptations of books and comic books can really work because the structure of a movie is different from the structure of a comic book or a book. But, whatever. It was about as good as one could get.
Right.
I don't know if it could have been done better.
But yeah, the show, I would recommend it. It's not for everyone, so check out if you're kind of, a little hesitant, check out the first episode, the second and third. If by the third you're not hooked, then you feel free to back out. The one thing that I have a hard time recommending this show to people outside the U.S. because this is definitely targeting a U.S. audience, and people outside the U.S.
Yeah, they wouldn't get it.
Yeah, everybody outside the U.S. like, unless you're really caught up in U.S. politics. Even people, I know a lot of people from outside the U.S. who say, like, the United States is obsessed with race. Like, people outside the U.S. are not as obsessed with race as much as the U.S. is. And that's understandable. The U.S. is a melting pot. Other places, not as much. I get it. But I would give it...
U.S. had slavery, kind of big deal.
Oh, come on. Like, a lot of other countries have had slaveries in their past. Like, that's... I hate...
Right, but this is what,
I hate when people say that. Like slavery, like, almost every single, like, group of people have had slaves in their past. Like, come on. Like, it's... yeah. So, I would recommend people... either wait until episode 3 comes out or watch it week by week and see if you enjoy it, or give it the 3-episode test. If you're outside the U.S., give it the 3-episode test. Even if you're in the U.S., same thing. But I would recommend it. It's actually a pretty interesting thing. We need more alternate U.S., like alternate reality versions of the real world. I like stuff like that. Yeah. And I'd give it a 7 out of 10. You would give it an 8 or 9 out of 10?
Yeah, I thought it was really strong, but I like all the actors. I like the subject matter. I think it's pretty thought provoking. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you're not American, it's going to be tougher. But I mean, the rest of the world, a lot of the world had slavery, but they didn't fight a big bloody civil war.
True, true, and that's what yeah. But guys, thank you so much for watching us. We will be back next week with episode 2. Stay tuned for that. And once again, thank you so much, and have a good one.